My beloved child, be still for just this moment, not because the world has fallen silent, but because something gentle has been moving toward you long before you noticed it. While your attention was fixed on ordinary days, a quiet conversation was unfolding in a place you have never seen. No spotlight. No grand announcement. Just familiar voices gathered together, speaking with unexpected sincerity. None of them realized that every word they shared was slowly shaping a future that would one day reach your heart. Before you let this moment pass, stay a little longer, because what began as a simple discussion slowly became something no one expected. It did not begin with your name. That is the remarkable part. It began with ordinary memories, passing comments, and reflections about life itself. Then, almost without intention, someone paused and quietly wondered what kind of person could truly bring lasting peace into their loved one's life. The room grew thoughtful. Different opinions appeared, but none carried anger or judgment. Instead, there was curiosity, the kind that opens doors rather than closes them. And then, almost as though an invisible thread had been waiting for the perfect moment, your name entered the conversation. For a brief second, silence became the loudest voice in the room. One person smiled softly, another looked down as if remembering something they had nearly forgotten. Someone recalled a story they had once heard about you. Another remembered a small act of kindness that seemed insignificant at the time but suddenly carried new meaning. Strange, isn't it? The smallest moments often become the strongest reasons people remember us. What you believed had gone unnoticed may have quietly remained in someone's heart far longer than you imagined. As the conversation continued, no one rushed toward a conclusion. They listened to one another with unusual care. Every memory added another piece to a picture that had never been fully seen before. Some admitted they had misunderstood you in the past. Others confessed they had been waiting for the right time before speaking honestly. Little by little, uncertainty gave way to understanding, and understanding slowly transformed into quiet respect. Sometimes the greatest change happens without applause. It simply settles into people's hearts until everything begins to look different. If you have ever wondered whether unseen moments can shape visible futures, hold on to that thought. There are conversations you will never hear, yet they still leave fingerprints on tomorrow. There are decisions made in quiet places that eventually become unexpected blessings in plain sight. This is why every act of patience, every gentle response, every choice to remain true to yourself carries more weight than you can measure today. Something important is waiting for you, but it cannot be hurried. It is unfolding at the exact pace needed for every heart involved to understand its value. Then came the question no one expected. It was asked gently, almost as if the speaker feared breaking the peaceful atmosphere that had settled over everyone. What if we have been looking at this the wrong way all along? No one answered immediately. Instead, thoughtful expressions filled the room. Sometimes a single question changes an entire conversation more than 100 confident answers ever could. And from that moment forward, everything they discussed began moving in a completely different direction. One by one, they started imagining possibilities instead of limitations. They spoke about character rather than appearances. They reflected on consistency rather than first impressions. They wondered what truly creates lasting happiness between two people. Each answer quietly pointed in the same direction without anyone forcing it. It was as though every path kept leading back to the same place, revealing something that had been hidden in plain sight all along. Don't skip this moment, because the most meaningful part has not yet arrived. The conversation ended with an understanding that surprised even those who had been speaking. Yet the decision itself was not spoken aloud, not completely. One final thought remained unshared, resting silently in the hearts of those gathered together. And that unspoken conclusion is the very piece that changes everything in the next part. A quiet decision is rarely announced the moment it is made. More often, it lingers in silence, allowing every heart involved to settle before revealing its true direction. That is exactly what happened after the conversation ended. No one rushed toward the door. No one hurried to change the subject. Instead, each person carried the discussion away with them, almost as though they had been entrusted with something too meaningful to handle carelessly. Stay till the end, because what happened next could only unfold after that silence had done its work. Hours passed, yet your name continued returning to their thoughts in unexpected ways. One family member remembered a conversation from months ago that suddenly made perfect sense. Another noticed how differently your soulmate spoke whenever your name appeared. There was a softness that could not be rehearsed, a quiet brightness that no one had paid close attention to before. It was not excitement alone. It was peace. And peace has a way of revealing truths that loud emotions often hide. Someone finally asked the question everyone had been quietly carrying. Have you noticed how much they've changed? The room became thoughtful once again. It was impossible to ignore. Small habits had shifted. Old worries seemed lighter. Hope appeared where uncertainty had once lived. Your soulmate wasn't pretending to be someone else. They were becoming more themselves. That simple realization caused everyone to look at the situation through completely different eyes. One by one, they began connecting moments that had never seemed related before. A smile that lingered longer than usual. A conversation that was remembered weeks later. A future spoken about with unusual confidence. Tiny details, almost invisible on their own, suddenly formed a picture that no one could overlook. Isn't it remarkable how truth often arrives quietly, asking only to be noticed instead of announced? Then an older voice gently interrupted the growing discussion. There was no dramatic speech, only calm wisdom shaped by years of watching people come and go. Character, that voice said softly, reveals itself over time, not in perfect moments. Those few words settled deeply into everyone's heart. The conversation slowed again, but now it carried certainty instead of hesitation. As they reflected on everything they had seen, something unexpected happened. Instead of wondering whether you were good enough, they began wondering whether they had understood you too late. That single shift changed the atmosphere completely. Questions that once carried doubt now carried curiosity. Assumptions quietly disappeared, replaced by a genuine desire to understand who you really are beyond appearances and first impressions. Something important is waiting for you, because this wasn't simply a conversation about approval. It became something much deeper. They started imagining what life might look like if kindness remained at the center of every future decision. They spoke about loyalty, patience, and the quiet strength that cannot be measured by outward success. Without realizing it, every quality they admired kept bringing them back to the same conclusion. And then, just before everyone prepared to leave, one family member said something so unexpected that no one answered right away. It wasn't because they disagreed. It was because the words felt surprisingly true. The room fell into another gentle silence, and every face reflected the same quiet realization. The decision they thought they had made was only the beginning. Small habits had shifted. Old worries seemed lighter. Hope appeared where uncertainty had once lived. Your soulmate wasn't pretending to be someone else. They were becoming more themselves. That simple realization caused everyone to look at the situation through completely different eyes. One by one, they began connecting moments that had never seemed related before. A smile that lingered longer than usual. A conversation that was remembered weeks later. A future spoken about with unusual confidence. Tiny details, almost invisible on their own, suddenly formed a picture that no one could overlook. Isn't it remarkable how truth often arrives quietly, asking only to be noticed instead of announced? Then an older voice gently interrupted the growing discussion. There was no dramatic speech, only calm wisdom shaped by years of watching people come and go. Character, that voice said softly, reveals itself over time, not in perfect moments. Those few words settled deeply into everyone's heart. The conversation slowed again, but now it carried certainty instead of hesitation. As they reflected on everything they had seen, something unexpected happened. Instead of wondering whether you were good enough, they began wondering whether they had understood you too late. That single shift changed the atmosphere completely. Questions that once carried doubt now carried curiosity. Assumptions quietly disappeared, replaced by a genuine desire to understand who you really are beyond appearances and first impressions. Something important is waiting for you, because this wasn't simply a conversation about approval. It became something much deeper. They started imagining what life might look like if kindness remained at the center of every future decision. They spoke about loyalty, patience, and the quiet strength that cannot be measured by outward success. Without realizing it, every quality they admired kept bringing them back to the same conclusion. And then, just before everyone prepared to leave, one family member said something so unexpected that no one answered right away. It wasn't because they disagreed. It was because the words felt surprisingly true. The room fell into another gentle silence, and every face reflected the same quiet realization. The decision they thought they had made was only the beginning. Hidden beneath it was one final choice, one that involved your soulmate directly. That choice remained unspoken until the very next meeting, and when it was finally revealed, even your soulmate was left speechless. There are moments when the quietest room becomes the place where the greatest turning points begin. Days had passed since that first conversation, yet none of them felt as though it had truly ended. It had simply continued inside each person's heart. Memories kept resurfacing without invitation. Small details that once seemed ordinary now carried unexpected meaning. And then, without planning it, they found themselves together once more. No one announced why. Somehow, everyone simply knew there was still one unfinished thought waiting to be spoken. Stay with this moment, because what followed revealed far more than anyone expected. This time, the atmosphere felt lighter. There was no uncertainty filling the room. Instead, there was reflection. One family member quietly admitted, "I've been thinking about this every day." Another smiled and confessed that they had started noticing how often your soulmate mentioned you without even realizing it. It wasn't through grand declarations or dramatic stories. It was hidden inside ordinary conversations, simple smiles, and hopeful plans for days that had not yet arrived. Sometimes the deepest feelings reveal themselves through the smallest patterns. Then someone asked your soulmate a gentle question that no one had dared to ask before. When did everything begin to feel different? Your soulmate paused. The answer did not come immediately. It wasn't because the words were difficult. It was because the feeling itself had grown so gradually that it was hard to find the exact beginning. After a thoughtful silence came a quiet response. "I don't think there was one single moment. I think I slowly realized that every time I imagined peace, somehow, they were already there." Those words settled over the room like the calm after gentle rain. No one interrupted. No one tried to explain them away. They simply allowed the truth of that answer to rest where it belonged. For the first time, the conversation was no longer about possibilities. It had become about understanding. Every family member could see that this wasn't built on excitement alone. It had grown through patience, respect, and the quiet confidence that often lasts the longest. One by one, they began sharing their own observations. They remembered how your soulmate had become more hopeful, more grateful, and more willing to believe that good things could still happen. They spoke about how difficult seasons no longer seemed to define every tomorrow. They noticed a new calm that had quietly replaced old uncertainty. Without intending to, they were describing the influence of someone who had never needed to demand attention to leave a lasting impression. Don't skip this part, because something meaningful happened next. A gentle laugh broke the silence, followed by warm smiles around the table. One family member nodded slowly and said, "Maybe we've been protecting ourselves from a future that's already quietly taking shape." Another added, "Perhaps the best decisions aren't the ones we force. They're the ones we finally have the courage to accept." With every passing minute, the uncertainty that once filled the room continued to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence that felt both peaceful and genuine. Something important is waiting for you, because the evening was almost over when one final suggestion changed everything again. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was offered with kindness and careful thought. The family agreed that instead of rushing ahead or making assumptions, they would choose something far more meaningful. They would encourage your soulmate to trust what had been growing naturally all along, without fear, without pressure, and without pretending to be anyone else. As everyone prepared to leave, one older family member remained seated for a moment longer, watching the empty chairs with a thoughtful smile. Then, almost to themselves, they whispered a sentence that no one had expected to hear. The words were so simple, yet they carried the weight of everything that had happened. "I think the next chapter has already begun. They just don't know it yet." No one responded, but every heart understood exactly what those words meant. And in the next part, your soulmate discovers something completely unexpected, something their family quietly prepared long before they ever realized it. Not every meaningful surprise arrives wrapped in celebration. Some appear through ordinary moments that seem almost too simple to notice. That was exactly how the next chapter began. There was no special occasion, no carefully arranged gathering, no dramatic announcement. Life continued as it always had. Yet beneath the surface, something had quietly changed. Every member of the family now shared an unspoken understanding, and because of that, even the smallest conversations began carrying a different warmth. Stay till the end, because the decision they made was about to reveal itself in a way no one expected. Your soulmate noticed it first without fully understanding it. The conversations at home felt lighter. Whenever your name appeared, there were no awkward pauses anymore.